If you're like many of us, the holiday season might have left you with a bit of extra debt, but the Sharp Mortgage team is here to help. I recently discovered the incredible work they're doing to help folks consolidate their holiday debt through smart refinancing. They're turning financial stress into financial freedom. Managing debt can be overwhelming, but the Sharp Mortgage team makes the process a breeze. Their experienced team understands the ins and outs of the mortgage world and is dedicated to finding solutions that work for you. Imagine having one manageable monthly payment instead of juggling multiple bills. The Sharp Mortgage team can make that a reality. Plus, they're not just about numbers. They genuinely care about your financial well-being. So if you're ready to kick that holiday debt to the curb and start the new year on a financially strong note, reach out to the Sharp Mortgage team today. Visit their website, sharpmortgageteam.com. That's sharp with an E at the end, sharpmortgageteam.com, or give them a call. Don't miss this chance to take control of your finances in 2024.
This is the Triad Podcast Network.
Hey everyone, Happy New Year. It is 2024 and we are getting things started with our financial podcast with our certified financial planner. She is Jennifer Johnson with 3 Magnolias Financial Advisors. They are a local business right here in the heart of Winston-Salem. Jennifer, this time of year, we said, hey, do we kind of, as we were discussing what to talk about on this show, we said, do we kind of go to our normal, what are your financial resolutions for 2024? Mm-hmm. I feel like we can go back and I could just link off to the one we did in 2023 and 2022, right. And it would probably be similar content year after year. I mean, most people's financial resolutions tend to be within the same scope year after year. Right. So we said, all right, well, it's still probably relevant to get into New Year's resolutions from a financial perspective, but we'll take a little bit of a different spin on it, which is we're going to talk about what are some of the things, the roadblocks and obstacles that typically end up getting in the way of people's financial resolutions. So if you've made something regarding your personal money situation, what are some things that might end up short-circuiting that? So and Jennifer, I think not just with money, but with New Year's resolutions, I think we all kind of understand that a lot of them tend to fail. But I don't know if we quite understand the significance or the large number of resolutions that end up going by the wayside. And so looking at that was kind of staggering, right?
Right. That's right. Yeah. We've talked about this before. You know, one of the top resolutions for people going into the new year is often financial. And, you know, you can see all sorts of different surveys. And of course, the numbers are going to vary a little bit, you know, across different surveys that might be out there, depending upon the population, I'm sure. But I think we can all agree that most New Year's resolutions, we don't stick with those. Right. I mean, I saw surveys as low as 16 to 17% as the success rate, right? Across New Year's resolutions. So that's really low, right? And so it sparked my thinking, you know, why is that? You know, why are we not successful? And, you know, what is the role of an advisor in particular? You know, how can I be more helpful in people that are, you know, for people that are setting New Year's resolutions, if they be financial, and to help them stick with it. I don't know if you go to a gym, Adam, but I go to the Y's, and boy, the parking lot has been full the last week. We can probably all relate to that. I mean, if you do any classes, you better sign up, right? Because those classes are going to be really full. It's just amazing to see that, it's good in a way, right? I mean, you obviously want to start the year off right, but we all know that those memberships, those visits are going to trail off. And I think the same can be said of financial goals. At least that's what we see. And so I thought what it might be interesting for us to do is to really dive into, you know, why at least related to the financial goals, are people not achieving those? And, you know, how can they set themselves up, you know, for a better chance for success there?
Yeah. And as we were kind of going through our normal pre-show chat, you mentioned some of the things that you'll be mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned some of the things that you'll talk about in terms of why, some of the reasons why these fail. And I think about your example of going to the gym, and I think it relates really well to one of them that stood out when you were talking about them. You know, I think when people make a resolution to get in shape or to go to the gym, maybe they're coming off a situation where they haven't been going to the gym. They're working out they've been working out 0 days a week, right? In November and December.
Right.
And all of a sudden they make a resolution to say, well, I'm going to go to the gym every day.
Right.
So you're trying to go from 0 to 60 immediately, instead of just saying, okay, well, why don't you just start with going 1 day or 2 days?
Right.
You know, let's do something that is sustainable. If you try to go from 0 to 5 days or 6 days or 7 days a week, it's really difficult to maintain that. And you had said maybe that also is something that tends to thwart people's resolutions when it comes to their finances, right?
I think so.
Their eyes get too big, their goals are too large.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's right. That's one of the themes we see, is that goals are just too ambitious, right? I think that's a great example of, you go from not working out at all to you're working out 6 to 7 days a week. Well, that's going to be hard to sustain, like you said. So how does that relate, I think, to financial goals? I'm thinking of people that I have met in the past, that this tends to happen early on in a relationship, but, somebody might come in. It's pretty common when people get, closer to retirement. Let's say they've hit kind of a key age, maybe they're 55, and they've sought out financial advice, maybe for the first time. And so I'm meeting with them, and the first thing I usually ask them about are their goals. What's important to you? Retirement obviously is a big one, especially if somebody's, getting older than 40, 45. That tends to be the focus. But I, definitely sat with folks that said, I want to, I want to retire by 65, and I want to pay off my house, right? Or pay off all my debts, and the house being the big one. And, I'll look at it and be like, oh my goodness, that is very ambitious, right? Because with the homes in particular, as rates came down, and we're obviously been in a different environment in the last 18 months or so, but as rates have come down, people would refi their mortgages. And so they would tend to still have a mortgage, have a lot of years on their mortgage, and would come in because maybe they had read something, or it's just an idea they always had in their mind with, I've got to be completely out of debt, and I want to retire. And a lot of times they're a bit undersaved for retirement too. So I start to look at that and realize, whoo, there is just not enough income, coming in, because, you can do the math on what it would take to, say, pay off a mortgage that was scheduled to be paid off in 25 years and pay it off in 10. But if you do that, there may not be enough money to save, right? So you realize, wow, there's really these, conflicting goals, and or, I want to help my child pay off their student debt before I retire. And, sometimes you just look at those goals and realize, wow, I know right away that's going to be ambitious. But I wonder if there's not a lot of people out there like, this is going to be the year I'm going to pay off my house, or I'm going to save X dollars, and just realize, wow, it's just the math doesn't work, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So what would be, I work a lot in sports, and the sports cliche is try to get 1% better every day.
Right.
And I almost think like it's okay to set a small goal as long as it's a goal that puts you in a better situation.
Mm-hmm.
And if you keep that mentality and you build upon that every day, every week, every month, every year, you're always going to be moving in the right direction. So what's a good example of, okay, you mentioned paying off a mortgage.
Right.
What's a good example of saying, okay, instead of your goal this year being to pay off your mortgage, what's a better, more realistic goal to have related to something like that?
Yeah, I think if it's debt related, like we've talked about before, it may not be the mortgage that's the problem. It may be credit cards or other things, right? So, I might say to those folks, don't worry about your mortgage right now. Let's work on this consumer debt, right? Or this work on this car.
Hmm.
If they don't have those and they're just really anxious to pay off the house, we might say, well, if you've only been used to making your minimum payment, right? You probably can't double it, right? But let's say we could do some calculations and say, okay, let's figure out, if you paid an extra $200 a month toward your mortgage, it would take off X years, something of that nature, where it's a much more attainable goal. Because I think you're just like the gym. That's a great example of, you set this goal to go 6 or 7 days a week, and then 3 to 4 weeks in, you're exhausted, right? And you just realize you don't have time to go 7 days a week. You can't
Hmm.
make it work. You get a cold or something, and then now you're completely off track. If you set this goal, you're going to double your mortgage payment, and then you realize, shoot, I need new tires. So and so's got to get new glasses. You start to realize, well, I can't do that. It doesn't mean you can't do anything. I think where you're headed is the right direction, is to figure out what's an attainable goal, right? So what could we do that's more realistic, so people don't get, so discouraged.
Yeah. And, another thing that people might make for their resolution is, I'm going to cut out sugar this year, or,
Right.
and it's like,
Right.
okay, well, that's a great resolution to shout from the
Hmm.
mountaintops.
Right.
But let's say if you were eating dessert 5 days a week after dinner, okay,
Right.
well, I'm gonna only eat dessert 3 days a week.
That's
That's
right.
my
Yeah. That's
resolution.
right. That's a
Like,
good example, I think.
that's an achievable goal,
Yeah.
and it still
Yeah.
gets you to a better place. So
That's right. Yeah. I think when we set these like really drastic goals, and then donuts show up, in the break room, and you have one, then you're like, oh, it's
you
like
feel like
it's
a failure.
over.
Yeah, you feel like a
Yeah,
failure.
right. It's over, right? I mean, it's so I think we're on the right track there with what's a sort of a in moderation kind of goal, like something that's reasonable. And I think also, something that you were talking around this, but another point is something that we can quantify, that we can measure, right? Some sort of goal, like, if and it's easier, I think, with debt, because you can definitely measure that. Most financial goals, you can measure, but one of the things I think is challenging for people is they'll, say, I want to retire. Well, part of the role we play as your advisor is to help you figure out, what does that mean, right? Like, what's the math of that? What income would you need if you retired? Right now, what does it look like you would have? And is that going to be workable? So as opposed to just saying, well, I want to retire, or I want to send my kid to college. Well, that's a big difference if your kid's going to High Point versus App State, right?
Right. Yeah.
Do you want to put some parameters around that? If you don't, what does that mean? Especially if you're like us, we have multiple kids,
Right.
right? So like some of those things where, people say, well, I want to pay for every penny of their college. And then I also want to do this, this, and this. And you realize, ooh, there's some math there. There's some just quantifiable limitations,
Yeah.
that we need to
Yeah.
work through.
This time of year, people like to make plans for what they want to accomplish. Maybe your focus in 2024 is buying, selling, or investing in real estate. Maybe it's purchasing your first home or building wealth for your family. Whatever your goals are, the agents at the Ginther Group can help. It's never too early to begin working with Blake Ginther and his team, who have been a trusted resource to the Triad community since 2010. To reach Blake and his team at the Ginther Group, just visit theginthergroup.com or give them a call, 336-283-8689.
Am I going to be in the right ballpark if I say a realistic expectation for someone when you talk about retirement, right? We're on that
Mm-hmm.
topic right now. So instead
Right.
of somebody saying, this year I'm gonna save for retirement, Or,
Right.
I think about it from the standpoint of right now I'm on track, according to my last conversation with my financial advisor. I'm currently on track to retire at the age of 65. What's wrong with making a goal, a New Year's resolution of saying, by the time that I talk with my financial advisor at the end of 2024, I want to be on track to retire by the time I'm 63?
Oh yeah, yeah, that's right. Yeah, I think
That,
that's reasonable. Yeah, and like maybe a I don't know if bad goal is the right way. That feels like the wrong way to say it, but to say you're going to go from 65 to 55 all of a
right.
sudden, right? Like you're like, ooh, and then we start to really try to figure that out, and that's when I crush your dreams, right? That's where you come in and be like, that's going to be tough, for all these reasons. I try to find a nice, gentle way to do it. But that is part of our roles, just because I do think that, to your point, like people get discouraged, like they realize when they start to they maybe get half the year into it and realize, oh my gosh, that's just
Yeah.
not possible without something really, really drastic.
Right. But think about if somebody had that small goal. That sounds like a small goal to say, I want to shave a year. I want to shave a year off of my target retirement age. If somebody had that goal and they achieved that small goal for 5 consecutive years or 10, I mean, think about how it's like the compound interest thing with saving for retirement. If you made that goal to say every 3 years, I want to be able to shave a year off of my target retirement age, and you did that consistently. I mean,
if you have the time, that could really make a big difference. Yeah. And I think maybe back to reasonable goals, so it might be if somebody if liken it to the gym, you're not going to the gym at all. To your point, maybe try to go 3 or 4 days a week. If you're not saving for retirement, at all, a good goal might be to say, well, I'm going to start putting money in if you have a 401k opportunity at work or something similar at your job, particularly like we've talked about in the past, that offers a match. Say your company's offering a match up to 6%. It's completely hypothetical, obviously, and you're not getting all that, right? So you're either not contributing or you're not contributing enough to get the whole match. Instead of, a big audacious goal, it might be to say, well, this year I'm going to contribute enough to get the full match, right, of my company. And so, and for a lot of people, you can do that without it impacting your take-home pay in a way that it's not sustainable, unlike doubling your mortgage or something like that. That might not be realistic. And I think where you're headed too, Adam, is so if you use that same sports analogy, okay, every year we're going to do a little bit more. You might set a goal, and a lot of times with retirement plans like 401ks, you can actually automate this where we call it auto escalation, where you go into your plan setup and you say, okay, I'm going to contribute X% now, and next year I'm going to automatically do 1% more. And a lot of times, people with raises, hopefully you're getting, some sort of raise maybe, or making a little more from year to year through commissions or whatever that might be. There's a good chance you won't even notice that extra 1%, but it does make a big difference down the road, particularly for a younger employee, somebody that's got a long time ahead. Same rationale with college savings. That's another big goal, that people have, is to save for their child's education. If you're not saving at all, maybe you say, well, I'm going to put $50 a month away for each kid or something like that. So something just to kind of start, and then make a goal next year. It's going to go to 100, that kind of thing, to where you're making continual progress instead of throwing yourself off the deep end. Yeah.
It's, to me, it just sounds like it's an internal struggle of, well, I want to have this big bombastic proclamation of a resolution.
Right.
But yeah, it's not gonna make people say, wow, that's a great goal, or wow, that's an awesome resolution.
Yeah.
But it's
Yeah.
way more attainable if you think about it from kind of
Right.
the standpoint that we're talking about. So
Yeah.
one of the things that people tend to get tripped up on around New Year's resolutions is their goals are too big. They're too
Right.
audacious. And what else could potentially trip somebody up when it comes to their financial resolutions?
Yeah. Yeah. Maybe a sub point of that is they're not measurable. Like I want to retire, but we don't put any, or I want to pay for my child's education without any parameters.
Mm-hmm.
But I think beyond that probably would be, it's a goal that you start, you maybe you write this on your heart, but you don't really tell anyone, that you're doing that, or you say at one time, but you don't get any support, social support, I mean. So I think finding that accountability partner, for lack of a better word, we've seen people have success with that. If it's the gym, or if it's your diet, it may be something where you get the blessing or the support, of a friend group or your family, that you guys are going to change the way you're eating, or you're going to go to the gym with your significant other. I think with financial goals, like that's also important, if your social network, your family, your friends, because we've talked about it before, where people, where their social network a lot, it's maybe going out to dinner a lot, going out to bars, maybe travel too, if you have a group that you travel with. So if you can kind of get caught up in that. So I could imagine if you've set a goal to save so much or spend less on a certain category, if your friend group is still behaving the same way, that could create, I think, some challenges for folks. Does that make sense?
It does, and I've it's the first I've really heard about an accountability partner or group related to your finances, because most people talk about it's easier to maintain consistency with the gym or a diet if you have somebody who's going through it with you and holding you accountable and pushing you and making sure that you're not losing ground. I think finances can work the same way. It's a different conversation, and maybe it's unusual to have that conversation with somebody, but if you're in the similar stage in life and you have goals of saving for your kids' college, or saving for retirement, or making sure that you're spending less on certain things, then maybe you do have this person that says, "Hey, did you do your meal prepping for this week so that you aren't going out to lunch and dinner as much every day?
Mhm.
Did you bring your coffee mug from home so that you didn't go and across the street or go through a drive-through and grab a coffee on the way to work?" I
Right.
think you can
Right.
absolutely do that with somebody else, right?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, and I think, as we've talked before, eating out is a big challenge, I think, for a lot of people from their budget, because it just becomes so expensive if you do it a lot. If that's part of your social network, we talked, I think, about ways to cut that back. Like, if you drink alcohol, maybe meet at someone's home before you go out to eat, and
Mm-hmm.
drink at home as opposed to at the restaurant, because that's a high margin, high expense item. Dessert at somebody's house as opposed to getting dessert at the restaurant, or appetizers at the restaurant, things like that. I think that's harder if you're in a group that, that doesn't support that, just wants to go out a lot, that, always wants to drink at dinner. Not that there's anything wrong with that per se, but if you're trying to set a goal to spend less on eating out, and your friend group keeps asking you to go eat out, I can see that kind of working in the opposite direction. So I think it'd be great, if you could get the support, for if it relates to your goal, get support of your social network. I think with spouses, I see this as being an item of tension sometimes, where couples, maybe one of the couple comes up, especially if it's a giant goal, right? Like if you said to Nicole, we're going to pay off our house this year, that would probably cause her a little stress, right?
Yeah.
Like, cause she's going to be like, I don't know how I'm going to feed everybody, if we're, if we have to all of a sudden pay off, our mortgage. And so I think most people are that way, right? Where they're, if you're in a relationship and you're sharing finances and one person's, either sets a big goal without consulting the other, I think that could be challenging. And I think it'd be good to have conversations, with your partner about what your financial goals should be and, get commitment from each other, because it really creates a challenge. I think if one of the two of you are really committed toward paying for college, for example, and
Yeah.
that means you have to eat out less. And then they find that the other partner continues to eat out at lunch every day, that's going to cause some tension, I think, maybe by about February, right? So that may be where you start to see some of these resolutions, particularly if you're, again, sharing finances, you got household finances, and then y'all aren't necessarily on the same page. I
Right.
think that's one of the things that can really sabotage it.
Yeah. And if you aren't sharing finances with somebody, or your accountability partner in these isn't a spouse or somebody you live with, it might require, which can oftentimes be a tricky conversation, but maybe it would be helpful to just, whoever is in your social circle that you are trying to achieve the same goals with, might require some financial transparency with that person.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's true. I mean, I think some people are more comfortable with that than others, but
Right.
I think that, we show that in other areas, right? That helps people achieve goals if they've got somebody else they're doing it with. I think also, be a single or a couple, I mean, that's part of the role of a professional advisor, right? Is to help you kind of stay on track for those goals, right? A lot of times I have people say, well, they know when they meet with me, if they haven't done X that we talked about last year, they know that there's sort of an accountability there, right? And so I think that keeps them, if you have an outside person that you're gonna talk to me annually, and we've talked about you getting life insurance, for example, because you have a young family now and you come back next year and you still haven't gotten life insurance. Like, part of that is the role, I think, of an advisor, of to really hold people sort of accountable to the goals that you set. But I think it definitely can be a friend. I mean, I'm thinking about, I believe this was related to maybe getting up early so you could work out, but there was a challenge, I think it was, like, from a friend group, to where if you didn't get up and text the friend group by a certain time, you had to make a donation to a charity that you hated. Do you remember those? Have you heard of anything like that?
Yeah.
Where if we said, well, I'm going to get up at 6 every day so I can work out, and then if I didn't text by like 6:05, I would have to make a donation to, some horrible charity, that I can't think of one right now, but, or maybe like a rival, like I would have to,
You'd have to
maybe
donate
the Tar
to,
Heel.
your rival
I'd have to give
schools,
to, like, exactly.
your rival
I'd have to
school's
make
athletic fund. Yeah.
That's right. I would have to give to the Duke University, basketball program or something terrible like that. So like that could be, a way to kind of get that social support, because you go at it alone, particularly if your goal's ambitious, or behavior change is hard. Right? I mean, that's really what we're talking about in all these areas. Like, when it needs willpower, I think that's where it's really tough. So I'm a fan of, like, anything that has automation, like your 401k that we mentioned. Automated savings plans, or extra payments on stuff. But also I think, because it does still require some discipline. So I think that's where having maybe a little bit of a human element can be helpful.
I like it. So yeah, it does require discipline, but I think what we're also saying is give yourself some grace and give yourself some room for error, to where you're not, if you slip up once, now all of a sudden you're your resolution is gone.
It's done. Right.
That takes you're not giving yourself the ability to be human in that situation.
That's right. And with finances, sometimes things are out of your control, right?
Correct,
I mean, you could have a surprise expense, and you had decided you're going to double up on all your payments, and then now you can't, and now you're completely derailed. And so, that's where I think it, comes back to setting something reasonable, something you can measure, and, getting some support.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Jennifer, any other tips you would give for folks that if they have financial resolutions to help them maybe a little bit more and raise that percentage from 16% of people who keep their resolutions?
Yeah, I think what we're really saying is like seek some help, right? Like, so I think certainly if folks don't have somebody they can talk to, they can reach out to me. I would say maybe tackle one goal at a time. Don't try to get out of debt, save for retirement, put enough money away to educate your 4 children, all in a year. Like, let's start with some baby steps. It might just be like, I'm going to have an emergency fund. I'm going to have 3 months of our expenses in cash. Like that may be the goal for the year, and that's enough. So start small, keep it reasonable, check in with your goals, make sure it's something that you can measure and you can check in, ideally monthly, and get somebody to help you with it.
Very good. Very good. And if part of people trying to achieve their goals or just get a little bit better with what they're currently doing, if they want to speak to a financial advisor and they want to reach out to you, Jennifer, how can they do so?
Yeah, we're local. You can call us. We are at 336-701-1600. You can check us out on our website. We're at 3 Magnolias Financial Advisors. So all spelled out, 3magnoliasfinancialadvisors.com. Or lastly, if you want to email me directly, it's Jennifer at the number 3-Magnolias.com. So any way they want to reach out, I welcome it.
All right. And if you weren't able to write that down while you were listening, the links to call her on the phone or email her are right there in the show notes. So Jennifer, appreciate it. Happy New Year. And looking forward to hopefully keeping some resolutions this year. So thanks for the time.
Absolutely. Thanks, Adam.
Securities offered through Cetera Advisor Networks, LLC, member FINRA SIPC. Investment advisory services offered through 3 Magnolias Financial Advisors. Located at 110 Oakwood Drive, Suite 480, Winston-Salem, North Carolina, 27103. 3 Magnolias Financial Advisors and Cetera Advisor Networks are not affiliated. Cetera is under separate ownership from any other named entity. All information is believed to be from reliable sources. However, we make no representation as to its completeness or accuracy. All economic and performance information is historical and not indicative of future results. The market indices discussed are unmanaged. Additional risks are associated with international investing, such as currency fluctuations, political and economic stability, and differences in accounting standards. The views depicted in this material are for information purposes only and not necessarily those of Cetera Advisor Networks, LLC. They should not be considered specific advice or recommendations for any individual. Neither Cetera Advisor Networks, LLC, nor any of its representatives may give legal or tax advice. Hey, thanks for listening to this episode on the Triad Podcast Network. Our mission is simple: provide information, advice, and stories about the people and places that make the North Carolina Triad such a great place to be. You can find us by searching Triad Podcast Network on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, pretty much wherever you like to listen. If you like what you heard and want to support the show and those that contribute, we would truly appreciate a rating and review on your favorite podcast app. It helps spread the word along, as do your shares on social media. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram at Triad Podcast. To get in touch with us, simply email info@triadpodcast.com. Thanks for listening.
This is the Triad Podcast Network.